Good evening, everybody. For those who don't know, I'm Jonathan Michie. I'm the president of Kellogg College, but perhaps more importantly for this evening, I'm the son of one of the Bletchley Park code breakers, Donald Michie. And so it's great that we've got this collaborative agreement with Bletchley Park. We've been running this collaborative agreement between Bletchley Park and Kellogg College for around 10 years now. One of the driving forces was, as many of you will know, our main programs in the college are software engineering and the related software systems and security, cyber security degree programs. And those students have been taken down to Bletchley Park over the years to show where it all began, how it all began. Also, one of the women code breakers from Bletchley Park went on to be an honorary fellow of Kellogg College. There were, you hear more, no doubt, but during the Second World War, there were something like 10,000 people working at Bletchley Park, which was pretty incredible. And most of them were women, but most of the code breakers were men, but like Alan Turing and Donald Michie. But Joan Thirsk was one of the women code breakers, and then went on to be a very successful social and economic historian and honorary fellow of Kellogg College. The first year we ran this program 10 years ago, unfortunately, Joan Thirsk had passed away a few years previously, I think already in her 90s, so it wasn't completely tragic. But her husband, who she had met and married at Bletchley Park, agreed to come and talk at the Bletchley Park week. Thought we could have him as an after-dinner speaker. And just before the arrangement started, I was told that he was 103 years old. So I did say, would he not prefer lunchtime? And I was told, no, he definitely dinner would be fine. And he was absolutely great. Had one of these little trolleys on 3 wheels, but he went sprightly around the college and gave an absolutely brilliant after-dinner speech. And as part of the arrangement we got Bletchley Park kindly sent us a whole load of pictures of Bletchley Park, which are along the corridor to your left as you come in the entrance of the college, if you ever want to go and look at them. And that includes a photo of Joan Thirsk when she was at Bletchley Park. So it's quite nice. We got a photo of Jimmy Thirsk standing in front of his wife as she was when they married at Bletchley Park. He sadly passed away the next year. Again, not very sad, but not tragic, given that he was 104. And The Guardian had a very nice full-page obituary of him, where they used a photo of him standing in front of our photo of Joan Thirsk as she was at Bletchley Park, which is great. Our speaker tonight is the relatively new still chair of the Bletchley Park Trust, Jacqueline de Rojas, who's also now a fellow of Kellogg College, because as part of the agreement we said we'd create a Bletchley Park fellow. It was Turing, clearly not Alan Turing, who sadly died in the 1950s, but his elder brother's son, Sir Dermot Turing, who's done a fantastic job for the college ever since. So we've made him a visiting fellow, and he continues to contribute. But now Jacqueline is the Bletchley Park fellow. So Jacqueline's going to speak to us, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion. So do think of your questions and contributions while Jacqueline's talking, and then she's very pleased to have an open discussion. So Jacqueline, can I ask you to join us? Thank you.
Thank you for having me, inviting me. Being the chair of Bletchley Park is an incredible privilege, I would say. And one of the things that Jonathan referenced was the relationships and the people at Bletchley Park. And it's really interesting when talking about Joan and Jimmy as husband and wife. Often the husbands and wives would not tell each other what they were doing. And so that's a big part of Bletchley, was just, keeping everything very close to their chest. And, what we do at Bletchley is just present and unravel and share the wonderful human stories that unfolded at Bletchley Park. So I do encourage you to look at the pictures in the hallway, but I also encourage you to come and visit us at Bletchley Park, because it is changing and evolving, and we're very proud of the heritage that we are preserving there. So perhaps I should start by saying, as chair of Bletchley Park, I work at a place where intelligence and the course of history, has changed the course of history, and it's impossible to be there and not ask what we will do with the power that we now have. And every period of significant technological change tests leadership. It tests our judgment and it tests our values. And it exposes whether institutions are built for speed alone or for responsibility. And AI is the latest chapter in this story. But I believe that history keeps us honest, and it reminds us where we've come from, what we've learnt, and what we must carry forward. And when we pay attention to it, periods of rapid change become moments to reset our direction and strengthen what matters and build what comes next with even greater intent. At Bletchley Park, this belief shapes how we think about the future, not as a break from the past, but as a continuation of it. Bletchley Park is often described as a place of history, but I see it as a place of continuity. It is, after all, where human intelligence first met machines at scale, where urgency forced collaborations across disciplines, and where ethical tension sat alongside technical ingenuity, and also where decisions taken under pressure reshaped the world. And it's also where some of the foundations of what we now call AI began to take shape, not as a named discipline, but as a way of thinking and working. And during the Second World War, Bletchley brought together computational thinking, machine-assisted pattern recognition, and deep collaboration between people and machines. And Turing's ideas on computation and algorithms opened the door to machines that could simulate reasoning. And code-breaking relied on machines like the Bomb and Colossus to identify patterns in vast volumes of data. And teams worked side by side with those machines, combining judgment and processing power to solve problems under pressure. Seen through today's lens, that does not feel like the start of something new. It feels like the early expression of a journey that we're still on. AI did not suddenly arrive in the 1950s. It grew out of wartime advances in computing, cryptography, and information theory, with Bletchley Park sitting at the centre of that story. And that story didn't end in 1945. In many ways, it has returned, because once again, intelligent systems are reshaping how knowledge, power, and authority operate. So AI is not just a tool, it's an amplifier. It amplifies speed, it amplifies scale, and it amplifies the consequences of poor judgment. So the question is not whether AI will change our world. It already is. The question is, how will we lead through that change? And it's tempting to see that this moment as one that is entirely new. And that's part of the risk. One of the least helpful narratives around AI is that history has little to offer because the technology feels different. What is new is not intelligent machines. What's new is the pace of deployment without shared understanding or oversight. And at Bletchley, those building early computing systems were acutely aware of consequence. They worried about misuse, about concentration of power, about what happens when capability outruns governance. And those concerns did not slow their progress, they shaped it. And the real risk today is not speed. It is speed without reflection. And reflection is where history earns its place. Which brings me to why spaces like Kellogg matter so much. This community, your community, brings philosophy alongside engineering and humanities alongside science, policy alongside practice. And that is exactly what this moment requires. AI does not belong to a single discipline. It cuts across all of them. It can't be uninvented, and it can't be managed in silos. So philosophers are asking questions about agency and responsibility. Engineers are building systems that scale these questions at speed. Educators are redefining what learning now means. And leaders are making decisions that will shape how all of this lands in society. We're all working on the same problem, but from different angles. And that convergence is not optional, it is essential. And this has real implications for places of learning, for universities. And this university, the University of Oxford, recently made a very deliberate decision to provide access to ChatGPT to every member of the university. And that decision matters. It recognises that AI is already part of the academic environment, that avoidance is not strategy, and that engagement is the only sensible response. It also reflects a wider truth that adoption matters. The countries and institutions that lean into digital capability tend to create more opportunity, attract more investment, and build more resilient economies. Not because the technology itself guarantees progress, but because engagement builds skills and confidence and momentum. Standing still carries a cost. Others move faster, shape the norms and standards, and define the value. But adoption alone is not the goal. Thoughtful adoption is, the kind that builds judgment alongside capability. Which brings us to a deeper question. If knowledge is increasingly accessible and synthesized and mediated by machines, are universities and places of learning still needed? Discuss. Yes, I would argue more than ever. In an AI-enabled world, inquiry and curiosity matter more, not less. Not because information is scarce, but because judgment is. Not because answers are hard to find, but because knowing which questions to ask and how to interpret answers is much harder. And intelligence is more than information. Information can be stored and retrieved and synthesized at scale. Intelligence is what happens when that information is applied with context, ethics, and intent. It is what turns knowledge into decisions and decisions into impact. That's the role universities continue to play. They don't just transfer knowledge, they shape thinking, they restore context, they force disciplines into conversations. And AI changes the tools. It doesn't remove the need for human judgment. If anything, it raises the bar. That responsibility becomes even more pronounced at postgrad level. Most of us are not encountering AI as theory. You're already using it in research, your organisations, your leadership roles. Some of you are making decisions today that carry real-world consequence. And that shifts the educational challenge. At this level, value does not sit in access to information. It sits in the ability to interrogate it, to recognise misplaced confidence, to understand where authority really lies. And AI raises the premium on judgment. It also raises the importance of interdisciplinary thinking. The most consequential decisions no longer sit neatly in one domain. And institutions like Kellogg matter because they create space to slow thinking down when the world is speeding up. And we also have to think about those who come after us. Future students will arrive having grown up with AI as a constant pressure. For them, using AI will be assumed. The real question will be how they think with it. They will need institutions that reward inquiry rather than recall, that teach interrogation rather than acceptance, and that build discernment. Bletchley Park reinforces that journey by showing that these dilemmas are not new. Previous generations faced similar moments of choice, uncertainty, and consequence. History does not give us answers. It does offer perspective. And that perspective shapes how we think about Bletchley Park today. When I became chair, I was clear that preservation alone was not enough. It must function as a living institution. Our exhibitions are designed to provoke, not to reassure. They ask who had agency, who carried risk, who was excluded, and what happened when machines moved faster than oversight. They tell the human stories of courage, judgment, endeavour, and love, of course. These are not historical curiosities. They are live questions. And when we hosted the AI Safety Summit at Bletchley Park, the location mattered. It anchored global debate in consequence. It reminded participants that intelligence has always carried responsibility. Our broader programming follows the same logic. Public talks, learning workshops, and family activities all reinforce that intelligence is human as much as it is computational. And all of this leads to a more fundamental shift in what we now ask of leadership and boards. AI is fundamentally reshaping what we demand of our leaders. In a world where answers are instant, leadership is no longer about knowing. It is about judgment, about asking better questions, about what we do less of as much as what we do more of. So restraint as much as ambition. And history shows that failure rarely comes from lack of information. It comes from poor interpretation, from overconfidence, from ignoring dissent. And boards in particular must resist the temptation to delegate judgment to systems. AI concentrates responsibility. It does not remove it. There is, however, one trap to avoid. Keeping the past relevant does not mean freezing it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. History exists to challenge us because a sanitized past teaches nothing. Used properly, history sharpens judgment and improves decisions. So where does that leave us? AI is accelerating faster than our institutions are adapting. That gap creates risk, not because AI is inherently dangerous, but because unexamined power is always dangerous. The responsibility then does not sit with technologists alone. It sits with universities, with boards, with policymakers, with industry, and with each of us as leaders and citizens. Academia brings rigour and inquiry. Industry brings scale and application. Public institutions bring legitimacy and accountability, and progress depends on how well these worlds work together. The opportunity now then is not to simply adopt AI, but to shape how it serves us. To decide where judgment must remain human, to design systems that widen opportunity rather than concentrate it, to ensure that capability grows alongside responsibility. In closing then, perhaps it is simply to say that we have been here before. Not in technology terms, but weighed by the responsibility of the choices it affords. Previous generations faced moments when tools outpaced understanding and power moved faster than governance. They did not have perfect answers, but they asked better questions and they made deliberate, values-led choices rather than simply reacting. This is what this moment asks of us: to stay curious, to stay responsible, to stay connected across disciplines and sectors, and above all to recognise that the future of AI will not be determined by the technology itself, but by the quality of the judgment that surrounds it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Very, a lot of food for thought there. I'll throw it open in a minute, but first I wanted to ask the obvious question, which you did touch on, and it sort of hinted at your answer, but the blunt question about are you an AI optimist or pessimist? Clearly there are potential gains through better healthcare and everything else. On the other hand, there are all the dangers. I saw in today's papers that it said that the increased electricity usage from the new data centres will equal the entire peak load currently in Britain, in the UK, and trying to meet that will then divert energy away from the other projects that try to decarbonise the economy and so on. So in broad terms, how would you react to that question about whether you or we should be AI optimists or pessimists?
I've got a mic. So I would definitely say that I am a technology optimist, have always been. I love what it offers. I am also deeply curious and super clear that we need to play our part in discerning how it serves us rather than be controlled by it. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely say I'm an optimist. I would also just remind everybody that Slough is the data centre of Europe, just in case you didn't know that. The highest concentration of data centres in Europe, in Slough.
So following on to that a bit is I want to ask about the sort of global threats. I mean, clearly, University of Oxford, like everyone else, is under cyber attack, on a daily basis to extraordinary scale. There's all the AI generated threats we're warned about from potential hostile powers, Russia, wherever, but then also the danger of non-UK companies holding control over our economic processes. Visa and MasterCard controlling financial transactions, Palantir, the American company, having control over data and so on, and with the trade wars, etc. The danger that the UK may be at risk from that global instability. I mean, what does that mean in practical terms? Do you think about how we as a country try and ensure we do have whatever capabilities or resilience is necessary in that situation.
So we do need to worry about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which I would argue is definitely Russia, definitely China, definitely North Korea, definitely Iran, and US is a bit tricksy. You know, to be clear, I would say that every country needs to invest in becoming a digital nation of significance. I think the investments that the UK are making are solid. Are they enough? That's difficult I think we have an over-inflated opinion of how big we are as a country, because we aren't a big country in the face of those other economies that are investing just, force multiplier times amounts of money in technology. And they are using it to their competitive advantage for sure. I think this is a time to create partnerships and to reach out for warmth with other nations who are in a similar position. 1 + 1 is definitely 11 in this scenario. So I think partnering is where we need to be.
Jacqueline, that was incredibly inspiring, thought-provoking, very, very useful. So thank you so much, and we will very much look forward to carrying on the collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you.